Let's have a conversation around the work of a new feature film that's coming through. Right? Award-winning filmmaker Tebogo Malope is returning to Limpopo with a new project that looks back at a defining chapter in South Africa's history. Malope has made an announcement for his latest feature film, studying under the barrel of a gun, a political, psychological drama set during the military occupation of the University of the North in Turfloop, or University of Limpopo, as it is known. The film tells the story of Ernest Khosa, a quiet rural student who becomes drawn into the underground resistant movement as a young person, and other young people, of course, in the university. So we've got the filmmaker on the line so we can have a conversation about this wonderful new film. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Channel Africa.
How's it going, guys?
We're good. Such an interesting subject matter. Talk to us about just your thinking around this particular part of South African history and why it was so important for you to document it in this manner.
So I first went to that area, Mankweng, Turfloop, more than 15 years ago to shoot a show called Skeem Sam. I think a lot of people might know about that show. And I remember when I was there was something that was sort of pulsating in the atmosphere. There was an energy that I couldn't quite grasp. You know, there was a richness of history, and I always wanted to go back. And I never knew what would draw me back to that. And sometime last year, I was confronted with a book written by Ernest Khosa, who was the then SRC president in those 80s years. And when I read the book, I realized, interestingly enough, that this year is the 40th anniversary of that occupation. So imagine you're at the university, you go to bed on the 11th of June, 1986. You just left the library or you left the soccer field. You walk into your rest, you sleep, you dream nice dreams, you dream about your graduation. And then you wake up the next morning, it's a military barrack, the whole school. The soccer fields are taken over by the army, the libraries are taken over by the army. You get woken up at wee hours of the morning so they can search you under your bed. The SRC committee gets arrested and they go to jail. And then it becomes turmoil. And remember the 80s, it was a state of emergency. And so I thought, as the 40th anniversary of this story, that not a lot of people know about. Even in the era, you'd be surprised how little people know about this incident. That is the 40th anniversary of it, 50th anniversary of June 16, 1976. I thought it would be great to put a light on this particular story and this period of time.
The auditions are currently open in Polokwane, and filming is set to start in April. I know that you are still looking for, some actors and young people to portray the various characters. The main one, Ernest Khosa. Tell us a bit more about him.
What's really fascinating about Ernest, and he's still around, which is quite interesting. And so it's one thing to do a movie about a character who doesn't exist, so you don't necessarily you can't really touch them.
Yeah.
And so over the time that I've known him since, I'd say last year till now, he's a very spiritual faith man. He's very diplomatic. He's very humble. He's I always say every time I see him, I'm like, you're a sniper. He's a silent killer. He's silent but powerful, And he's a very influential person. It's hard to be in his presence and not feel compelled and not feel driven and not feel passionate. When he was voted in as the president, that's when the state of emergency was at its peak. And you must remember, within the university, there was also structures, right? So there was underground structures, which some of the students were quite militant. They used to call them fire eaters, In fact, some of the most prominent journalists were in that group today, like your JJ Davan. He was a fire eater at Turfloop University. And individuals like Brian Molefe of Eskom fame, he was a fire eater at that university at the time. And then you had other students that were in the student Christian movement that were a lot more religious and a lot more calm. In fact, some of the former president of the SCM at University of Turf is our current president, President Cyril Ramaphosa, former President Kgalema Motlanthe, and Reverend Frank Chikane. And so with all these structures within the university and the military occupying it, here rises an individual called Ernest Khosa, who's quiet, who's calm, who's determined that the military is going to leave the university. And so what we see this whole experience through his eyes. How to balance the fire eaters to the Christian movement, to the South African Council of Churches, to the university management. How does one individual who's sitting at the heart of it manage to balance all these elements so that the military eventually leaves? And that's the story that you're going to see.
I think you have some extraordinary referencing. I mean, it's just amazing how you're able to reference the past. So with that acknowledgement, and I want to go back to your days on Skeem Sam 15 years ago. Turfloop, how did that, how did that experience or those years, as it were, over a decade now, influence, or how is it going to influence how you tell this particular story in contemporary times?
I love how you opened that question. You said, there's I referenced the past. When I was there more than 15 years, by the way, this year is my 21 years in the film industry. And so...
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I just got my keys.
Stunning.
When I was there 15 years ago, I could sense that there was a rich history. And that there's a history to draw from, right? And I didn't know what it was. And now, when I started digging deep on the history of the Turfloop University, it was called back then, I realized that Steve Biko in 1969, he launched SASO, South African Student Organization, at University of Turfloop. And he became the first president of SASO at University of Turfloop. And then in 1972, there was Ongkhopotse Tiro, who was the SRC president, who made that famous speech against Bantu education, and then got letter-bombed in exile because of that specific speech. And because of Tiro at University of Turfloop, we got Botsietsi Mashini in 1976, got June 16. And so you realize that actually our history as a people, you cannot divorce that university. And so I like to draw from the past to give us reference of where we are right now, and then hopefully inspire the decisions into the future. So there's a sense that to look at what these young people have achieved over the years, since the 60s, 70s, 80s, and what is it that we are occupied with as young people in 2026.
Yeah.
And so I like to reference the past, not to take us back there, but to give us context on the present and hopefully inspire us for the future.
What is your hope then, as you're touching on that, specifically for the young people, the young audience who may not have lived during that time, but are now going to be exposed to this content, this story, this history? What are you hoping that, how are you hoping that they will respond to it? Because oftentimes, as a young person, you look back and you watch videos and movies and films about the past. It ends up, making you, for lack of a better word, angry. And you start looking at your surroundings and start saying, my goodness me, we've come a long way.
I think anger is a nice reaction. I think sometimes you're not angry enough. But I always say, and people that have heard me talk and speak a lot, they always hear me say, you cannot be what you do not see. And I feel like we have to expose young people to what other young people have accomplished. As a young person, you can sit around and go like, my life is helpless. I don't have this. I don't have that. Even in my current industry now, I see a lot of young people saying, oh, the DTR rebate system, they're not getting money to do this or do that. And it's good and well, right? But as soon as you show people and you remind them, you show them an image of other young people that in a particular era, they looked at their circumstances and they didn't sit down. They didn't just cry about it. They acted. They did something. And so for me, in a sense, I hope to show young people that are feeling helpless today that there are young people that have felt helpless before. And there will always be young people that feel helpless. But there's a certain group of young people that in their helplessness, they had agency and they stood up and organized and did something about it. So if there's anything that I hope it inspires them is to see some other young people with agency and then think of themselves in that position and then hopefully have agency for 2026 and the future and do something about their current situation.
You are such a star, Tebogo. You really are, because I think also just very important to acknowledge how you're involving the community in this project, and opening up auditions, so that young people can actually see themselves, even though they don't carry the weight of this history. They carry a piece of it in the contemporary time that they find themselves in. So let's talk about the audition process. Maybe I am listening and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I would be fabulous as character X. So how is that going to work in terms of auditions? Can people still come through for that?
One of the things you mentioned earlier is that I draw a lot from my history and my past, and which I do. Well over 20 years ago, before I started, I got a rare opportunity for young people like me who come from previously disadvantaged, less resourced environments to go to a film school. But then when I got there, it was tough, it was hard, it was rough. It was probably one of the worst years of my life. It was great. I left out with the vocabulary, with friends that I could collaborate with. But just being there as somebody from my background was tough. And 21 years plus years later, there's a lot of other young people that are still going through the same stuff, even worse stuff. And then you go to other provinces, you realize they don't even have access to institutions where they could be trained in this field. And so with this project, we're not only just auditioning people, but we're also going to train technical interns also. So we're going to train young people from mainly the mountain area. We're going to train them on different departments, lighting, grips, camera, hair, makeup, wardrobe. In fact, they're going to be trained by who's going to be their HODs on set. And so from that process of training, we're going to place them immediately on the shoot. So you go from training for like a week or two to being on set for another 2 to 3 weeks. And then when you leave out there, it's going to be a credit-bearing exercise. Wow. So you'll be a half a step further in your process of learning. But then you'd have an on-set experience. And so for young people that are looking for something like that, they can send an email to info@barrelofagun.co.za, info@barrelofagun.co.za. And then we're doing guys that want to be in front of camera, right? So your supporting casts, your extras, we're going to need crowds. We're going to need to fill some key roles. So if you want to do auditions for that, you can send a 1-minute clip monologue on auditions@barrelofagun.co.za, auditions@barrelofagun.co.za. And then lastly, we are doing open auditions this coming Thursday and Friday. Go Polokwane at the SABC in Polokwane from 9 o'clock in the morning. So guys can come there, come prepared, Google a 1-page monologue or find a scene from Skeem Sam that you like, come and show us what you can do. And then from that grouping, we're gonna then place as extras or supporting cast, etc. So auditions at barrelofagun.co.za to send your tapes and whatnot. If you happen to be in Polokwane and Mankweng, come Thursday and Friday for open auditions. Bring a monologue that you can come and perform for the panel from 9 o'clock in the morning at the SABC studios, and Thursday and on Friday. And then if you're interested in being a technical and production intern, send your information on info@barrelofagun.co.za. Most people are lastly about the interns. They always say, but I've never been on set. What can I send to prove? I always say to people, for me, I'm more interested in your storytelling, your passion for storytelling.
Right.
You find that there are painters and the sculptors there that are like, I've never been on set, but they like telling stories using sculpturing or painting or poetry. Just motivate that you are into storytelling, and then we'll find you, we'll slot you. We know what we need. We will slot you in the movie.
Amazing. Tebogo, where can people follow you on socials?
Tebogo Malope.
That's it.
Like Rebecca. Tebogo Malope.
Yes, sir.
I love that.
Tebogo Malope, like Rebecca, on every platform, on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook, on all of them. On Snapchat, it's at Tebogo Malope. You'll find me there.
And what a man to be leading this. I think the young people are going to learn quite a lot from this man, because Tebogo has been a part of the acclaimed 4-part documentary series featuring former President, US President Barack Obama, and rapper J. Cole. So what a man to be at the helm of this. Tebogo, thank you so much for your time, and all the best with this production.
Thank you, guys. And thank you for making noise. I really appreciate it.
Multi-award winning director Tebogo Malope. He's got a film that he's going to be producing very soon. It's titled Studying Under the Barrel of a Gun. And auditions are open. If you want to be a part of it, whether in front of camera or behind, reach out to him. We've come to the end of our show. What a show it has been.
Yes, man. Wait, I just had to say it that way.
About Debs, in general.
No, absolutely. Yeah. You know, where I come from, in a township in South Africa, listen, you must know you have made it in life. So big love to Tebogo Malope, with us 2 minutes away from 4. It was a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us.